Welcome everyone back, or if this is your first time, to Accented Dialogues in Diaspora again. On this episode or this edition of Accented, we'll have a chance to talk with some of our very esteemed guests, with our guest host, on what it means to chase generational threads, on mythology and on motherhood, and we'll have a chance to be introduced to them. To introduce myself first. I am one of your co-hosts and the MC for Accented. My name is Philip Nguyen. I teach ethnic studies, Asian American studies at San Francisco State University. And I've been a part of DVAN, or the Diasporic Vietnamese Artist Network, since my time as a graduate student. In Asian American studies, I was reading the Diacritics blog. I was looking for a way to really connect with my cultural identity through literature, art, and poetry, and I stumbled upon DVAN. Um, and since then, I feel very fortunate to have become a part of DVAN in this sort of way. And so before I introduce you to our guest host and our guest for today, I want to share a little bit about DVAN. You can learn more about us by visiting dvan.org, and we'll drop that in the chat. DVAN believes that the stories and aesthetics of a thriving Vietnamese diaspora can unite our global community. Its mission is to foster diasporic Vietnamese and Southeast Asian literary voices. DVAN promotes nonfiction, fiction, and poetry to empower artists in the diaspora and inspire understanding and dialogue within our community and with others. We champion our complex and diverse stories for future generations. We are refugees, immigrants, survivors, descendants, and our stories must be heard. And I think that as the foundational aspect of what DVAN is really about, and why we kind of brought this show, Accented Dialogues in Diaspora, together, is for us to be able to have these sort of intimate conversations. This is a show that's been, I think we're going on our fourth year. We've had plenty of guests that have come back to guest host with us, and guests that have gone on to are doing and continue to do great things around the diaspora. Um, this show and DVAN as a nonprofit organization would not be possible without the support of so many of you all who are here listening to the show or joining us on Zoom. And I want to take a moment to again direct you to dvan.org, our website, to also consider donating, so that we can support artists, writers, authors, poets, creators, for future generations, um, and instill a sense of community and connection between Vietnamese and Southeast Asian cultural producers in the diaspora, as we really create and cultivate the culture that we want to be a part of, knowing that it's something that perhaps didn't exist before this, right? Um, so again, thank you all so much. At the end of the show, there'll also be a QR code to leave some feedback. We're applying for some grants. We're looking for sponsorships for Accented. And so it'd be really helpful for us to keep the show going. If y'all could share with us some of your thoughts and feedback about the show. I'm going to go ahead and really quickly screen share what our IG page, our curated IG page looks like. Because if this is your first interaction with DVAN, I hope it's not your last. If you visit us on _DVAN on Instagram, you can get notifications there should be a bell somewhere around here. If you're on mobile, and learn about some of the upcoming events that we have, opportunities to be a part of writers' residencies, workshops, and just to listen to like dope people talk about the dope things that they do. So again, give us go ahead and follow if you aren't already, and check out some of the other projects that we have got going on. We have a really special show today because our guest host is actually someone who has been a guest for the Accented show before, just a short 3 years ago, which doesn't feel too long now. It feels kind of just like yesterday, when we did a show on writers in diaspora. Usually we have my co-host is Viet Thanh Nguyen. I think he's probably on his tour for the Sympathizer right now. So a subtle plug, if you haven't watched it already, the first episode of the Sympathizers HBO original limited series is out on Max. Be sure to check it out and the podcast after. And we wish you, Viet, if you're listening to this, and all the cast and crew and production team on the Sympathizer luck as the second episode comes out this Sunday. Um, for tonight's show, maybe it's appropriate that we don't have Viet because it's on motherhood. But I have the really distinct honor of introducing our guest host for today, Lee Tran, who is the author of the memoir House of Sticks, winner of the NYC Book Awards Hornblower Award, and named one of Vogue and NPR's best books of the year. She has received fellowships from MacDowell, Art Omi, Yaddo, and Millay Arts. If y'all could please give a round of applause in the chat wherever you are for our guest host, Lee Tran. Lee, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing so well. Thank you, Philip. And thank you so much for all the incredible work you've done for DVAN and for the diaspora in general. I'm so honored to be a guest host on Accented tonight. Yeah, I cannot believe that the first time I was here was 3 years ago. My book had just launched and I was so green, so nervous. And to just be so warmly welcomed to the Vietnamese community when previously I didn't really have a community here in New York City growing up, in Brooklyn in the 90s and early 2000s. So I just am so grateful to DVAN for all the work that DVAN has done and all the support that DVAN has shown me. And I've been a huge fan since the very first episode. And yeah, it's just like really lovely, incredibly lovely to return now as a co-host with you, Philip. You've been amazing all along. And yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. I'm joined by some fabulous guests who I'm so excited to be in conversation with. It's such an exciting time right now to be Vietnamese or Vietnamese American artists. You know, we're standing on the shoulders of giants like Viet Thanh Nguyen, Thi Bui, Jing Nguyen Phan, Wei Mai, Ocean Vuong, and I highly recommend that you all check out The Sympathizer on HBO. It's guaranteed to be a real treat. And without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce Tammy Nguyen, who is a multimedia artist based in Easton, Connecticut, whose work spans painting, drawing, printmaking, and bookmaking. Intersecting geopolitical realities with fiction, her practice addresses lesser-known histories through a blend of myth and visual narrative. She is the founder of Passenger Pigeon Press, an independent press that joins the work of scientists, journalists, creative writers, and artists. And you'll see her Instagram in the chat box. And I'm also really thrilled to introduce KT Nguyen, who is a former Glamour magazine editor. After graduating from Brown University with a degree in art semiotics, she spent her 20s and 30s living in New York City, San Francisco, Shanghai, Beijing, and Taipei. Wow, it's a lot of places. Um, and has now settled just outside Washington, D.C. with her family. She is a member of Crime Writers of Color, International Thriller Writers, Sisters in Crime, and Mystery Writers of America. You Know What You Did is her debut psychological thriller novel, and it's just 2 days old. It was just launched. Highly recommend. I'm so thrilled to be in conversation with you two tonight. So, you know, since we're all artists here, all storytellers, my first question is, what are your first memories of art and storytelling? And at what age did you come to realize your love slash talent for telling stories? KT, let's start with you.
Oh, starting with me. I saw this question. I thought it was interesting. My sister is a visual artist. She went to Parsons and did fashion design there. So she's 6 years older, growing up in the middle of Ohio. And we're the only family, Vietnamese family, pretty much the only family who wasn't white. It was interesting. So I think a lot of the artistic leanings came from isolation, feeling really isolated there. So you're just with your family, you're alone. So you create stories in your head. You read a lot. Growing up, my sister read every single book in our school library. So if you look at all the, they had the library card things, the stamps, and you signed it out their name. Her name was on every single book. We were just always reading or drawing. So I think that was where it came from.
Yeah, Katie, I can totally relate. As I mentioned before, growing up in New York City back then, there's like, I don't know, maybe 10 Vietnamese people that I knew. And we would go to temple, but I didn't really have a community of Vietnamese people. And so, yeah, I think it's so just on the nose when you say that it's from a place of isolation that we start to tell ourselves stories, as storytelling in and of itself can be a form of companionship.
Yeah. And
Um,
reading.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. Absolutely. Tammy, how about you?
I think like many folks, my grandma took care of me for a lot of my early childhood, and she used to watch a lot of Lung on the
Mm.
TV. And I used to try to sit there and figure out what was going on because it was kind of hard for me to figure out what was going on until I kind of just gave up or something. But I remember that like myth telling and a lot of storytelling. And I remember watching like big VHS videos of like Tam Cam and all these other Vietnamese stories and stuff. I liked that one a lot because I also read Cinderella at the same time. And so there was like this parallel. And then I have a very distinct memory in terms of like visual art. The first Vietnamese illustrator I learned of, my dad was, he was a teacher, and our house was filled with a lot of books that I got to read. And my dad was really awesome at just getting my sister and I as many illustrated books as possible when we were young. And one of them was called Angel Child, Dragon Child, and the illustrator was Vaughn and Mai. I don't recall exactly what the story was about yet, but I have very, very just vivid memories of how the little girl's hair was drawn. And it was like, could count every like thread of
Like
hair on her
strand.
head. It was
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, every strand. And they were so beautiful, and they kind of just flew wherever the wind flew and everything. And so that's one really, really fond memory of mine.
That's lovely. It's amazing, the images that really stick with you as a child and just kind of accompany you throughout life and inform your work. And Tammy, in a recent interview, you state that you are interested in confusion specifically. You say confusion is a humbling space to be in and a space that stems from being a diasporic product. You can see the contradictions, but they cease to ever become one. So can you tell us some more about this interest in confusion, where it comes from, and why you like creating this dynamic for your viewers to also experience? And Philip, if you could share some of that work, that'd be great.
Mm.
Yeah, I think maybe like when I was like starting out making art and stuff, I think that I was really searching for some kind of a way to create a thesis for the work or create some kind of a message to figure out what I stood for, what the work would be standing for. And I think that the more and more I tried at that, the more and more I struggled with being an advocate for a certain position or a certain perspective. And I think a lot of that came from just really reflecting on the contradictions between, the different ideologies of, that are distinct about Vietnamese culture and American culture, and then all of the places that you might be educated and travel to in between. And how all of those places and all of those people that you meet, the books that you read, the teachers that teach you, kind of come together in one person, right? Which is you or me. And I think that I had a lot of difficulty finding clarity in that. And so after a while, I think I started to become more interested in how the lack of clarity actually is real, and that all of these different things that are constantly in tension with each other are always kind of also rotating around each other. And like every single day, there's a new set of propositions that these different sort of ideologies and perspectives kind of challenge me for.
Yeah, wow. Such a beautiful answer. I love how nuanced it is. And also, as artists, we're always grappling with our own identities and the multifaceted nature of, especially being from the diaspora, all the different identities are in conversation. with themselves as we move through life. And so, when I look at your art, I mean, it's just such arresting images. And I can really see this, the sense of confusion that is infused within. And so, I mean, I really look forward to being in the same space as your art one day, because I'm just looking at the images on your website. It's really interesting and really powerful. Um, yeah, and so KT, your debut novel, You Know What You Did, um, as we mentioned before, was just released on April 16th. So huge congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you tell our listeners a bit about your book and why they should read it?
And also, how did
Sure.
you go from like being a magazine editor to a novelist too? I feel like since we're on the topic of confusion and diaspora, there must be some sort of like self self-discovery journey there.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a lot of questions at once. I I like to describe the novel as a cross between The Shining and Celeste Ng. Little fires everywhere, everything I never told you, because it's the part of the book is a slow descent into madness, or not too slow, but kind of slow descent into madness, like The Shining. And then I think it also mixes in elements of the family thriller that Celeste Ng specializes in. So it's a combination of those two. There's psychological horror in it. And I think being a magazine editor for many years helped me just shape stories, like learn to tell stories. And that's basically what novel writing is in a longer form. And I write commercial fiction, I write commercial thrillers. So the magazine writing really came in handy for making the story really tight, really sharp, really compelling, and easily digestible.
Yeah, I mean, was it hard to come from like the short form to the long form, or do you feel like you just treat it like each chapter as like its own little
It
world?
wasn't really hard to do. I just, at the time, I left magazines and I was working for, I want to say, like 10 years or 12 years in corporate copywriting and marketing. And I was flying every week from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, commuting like Monday morning and coming back Thursday. So it was like really tiring, exhausting. And I just knew I wanted to do something more creative. So I thought maybe I'll write a screenplay. And then I thought, or maybe I'll write a novel. And at the time, I was reading a lot of thriller novels. So I just decided to give it a try.
That's amazing. I also have thoughts of writing a screenplay and a novel, so maybe I'll get to that point in my life as well. Tammy, can you tell us a little bit about your artistic process?
And the forms that you landed on
Yeah.
to express that artistic
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
So, lately, I've been making a lot of exhibitions that are I don't know, like they're very researched. And they've also been pretty specific to the structures and the places that the opportunities happen to be in. So, for example, um, I just finished, or the show closed in January, but I had a show at the ICA in Boston. And it was an exhibition where I decided to explore Ralph Waldo Emerson's transformative essay called Nature. And what I did was I compared Emerson's Nature to the efforts in Vietnamese land reformation in South Vietnam between 1955 through, say, around 1960. And so that sort of collision of different histories was really specific to my interest in, say, Vietnam War history, but then it was also my interest in the local area where I knew that I was going to be showing this work to mostly folks who were in the Boston area. So lately I've been kind of forming shows in that way. And I think what I often do is I will research different histories and then I'll try to like find a whole bunch of things that are related, like visual things that are related, different little, the land reformation papers were really interesting because there were a ton of Vietnamese folk songs in the National Archives. And so I'd find all of this texture, this material to sort of build up a grammar for the show. And then the exhibition will usually be realized through sort of like three domains of work, which is painting, works on paper, and then artist books, which I have often called like the kind of heart and the heart of each exhibition. Right now, I'm working on another show that is thinking about the flag's convenience and the sort of the politics of freight ships along the seas, international waters, but I'm also incorporating it with Plato's Myth of Metals and the Timaeus. So that's kind of like bridging these other histories and mythologies that seem disparate, but through the process of making the art, hopefully they harmonize and then hold that confusion that I so seek.
Yeah, wow. That is so interesting. And can you tell us, when exactly you started sort of looking at these or becoming interested in these ideologies, and when that started to become a seed for your work?
I think that it started, so when I was it started a long time ago, but then I think it kind of evolved. Like it wasn't like it just happened one day. I think, after my undergrad at Cooper Union, I moved to Vietnam on a Fulbright fellow, and I ended up living there for 4 years. And it was a really transformative experience. After that, I went to grad school, and I had a really difficult time sort of matching the work with all of the sort of anxious new questions and confusing questions that I had after having lived in Vietnam for the first time in my life. And that that kind of internal quarreling led me down a path to learning a lot about taxidermy. And I actually became a taxidermist while I was in grad school because my university had this amazing ornithology library where they had every Friday morning you could go in and skin a bird and like help the collections. And so that quality of deep diving, deeply observing a subject, and then collaborating with folks who were so different from me. These scientists were doing amazing work on feather distribution and different kinds of, sexual evolution and all this other stuff, was so amazing to me that I wanted to find a way to pull it in. And then over time, I found that using science and using other stories in, say, anthropology, it started to grow, right, into different histories. These different ways of telling stories ended up becoming amazing proxies that I couldn't directly ask myself. And so that's kind of where it all began. And it's, obviously changed a lot over the years too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still, oh my gosh, I'm flabbergasted that you became a taxidermist briefly, like on this journey.
Amateur taxidermy.
I mean, it's still, I just love that in your exploration of your art, it's taken you down these really winding roads, and you're up for it, which is amazing. And KT, I would love to hear, what journeys writing, what you did took you on, and did the book, was the conception for the book the same throughout, or did it change? Did it evolve as you worked on it?
The starting point for the book was I was reading like Joyce Carol Oates, Shirley Jackson, a lot of psychological horror, and when I decided to set my mind to writing a novel, I read Stephen King's On Writing. I can't read craft books; I have no attention span for it, but that one's fun, so I read that one. And he starts by asking himself, "What if certain situations? What if you know?" And so I was walking my dog, and I thought, "What if?" My obsessive compulsive thoughts, the intrusive thoughts, I have obsessive compulsive disorder. What if those intrusive thoughts manifested themselves in my everyday life, like became real? And so that's the concept of, you know what you did. The tagline is if thoughts could kill. And it's a thriller psychological horror novel where the main character's intrusive thoughts seem to be coming true.
Yeah, and yeah, the main character, Annie Shaw, I mean, such a complex character. And by the way, everyone, I highly recommend this book. It is riveting. I was hooked from the first line. Um, and so yeah, this main character, Annie Shaw, experiences obsessive compulsive disorder. And which is really interesting because mental health is taboo. It's a taboo topic in the refugee diaspora communities. And so why was it important for you to create this character and tell her story? And what do you hope it will do potentially for the mental health community, if that was a hope at all?
Oh, definitely. One of the pieces I'm most proud of since publishing the book is the reception, whether or not readers like or dislike the book. Most of them like the book, thankfully, but they all have really positive things to say about the portrayal of mental health disorder in the book. Um, those with OCD feel validated. They see themselves on the page. There aren't many serious portrayals of OCD in the media. It's usually something treated in a very lighthearted way. And that's incredibly detrimental. I didn't know I had OCD until my, late 20s. A lot of people don't realize it because they see the character on TV like Monk or quirky, funny characters who are just like very particular perfectionists, and they think, well, that's not really me. That doesn't match up to these really dark, intrusive thoughts in my head. Um, and they don't know that they have OCD. So part of it is broadening the conversation, presenting a more sober, serious portrayal of OCD. And in particular, I don't think it's a secret that PTSD and their mental health issues are so common in refugee families, whether or not, I mean, and so often it goes untreated. And that's part of what the story and You Know What You Did is. Annie's mother clearly has PTSD. She has a form of OCD that results in hoarding, but she won't recognize it, of course. It's totally, she's unaware of it. And it's passed down to Annie, and it's how, no matter how hard Annie tries, it affects her own daughter as well. So it's 3 different generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And mental health struggles is something I can really relate with. And as you said, a lot of it stems from PTSD, from trauma, from the war, and just the diasporic experience in general. Um, my memoir was a huge theme in my memoir was also mental health and depression. And so it's just you reading your book and seeing, another uh type of mental illness portrayed so accurately, so beautifully. It's just really heartening to see that this conversation is expanding and continuing. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And speaking of like obsessive compulsive, I mean, I know visual artists can sometimes be really particular with the way that their art unfolds. So can you tell us a little bit about, the way that you decide when a piece is finished, Tammy, or do you just leave it unfinished? How's that go?
Well, that's so interesting. My studio, I think, is a lot like a kitchen. And I think that making exhibitions, I think, is a lot like making a really big feast. And for me, not everybody, for me. And I'm often working on many paintings at the same time. And then I also for my artist books and works on paper, they kind of take on different parts in the calendar and everything. And I think, you know, how do you know when a dish is done, right? Like you kind of you get better and better at it, and then you kind of just have a sense for it. And I think it's a little bit different every time. But I start the soup and the roast at the same time, and we kind of go on from there. And so I think that's the best way I can describe it. I think that something that is common and a frequent occurrence in all of my work is this kind of density of detail, right? So whether it's an artist book or work on paper or painting, where you've got these different experiences from, say, when you're standing far away from the work and you can come up close and really have these moments that you can only see if you are an inch away or, whatever. That kind of myopic opportunity is something I'm really excited about. I often think about my works as having a very kind of symphonic space where there is a spectrum of, grand forms, sweeping forms, and a variety of very, very, very small subjects and moments to look at.
Yeah, wow. I am so interested in this the symphonic space that you talk about within your work. And again, I can't wait to check it out in person. And I love this analogy, this like cooking analogy that you used in terms of the process. It's so apt. And I think it's something that writers can relate to. I don't know, KT, like in the process of like writing your book. Can Are you able to tell like when the book is done? And was that difficult for you?
Well, I started it 3 years ago from starting writing to publication. So I mean, periods where you're working with your agent possibly and revising before it's submitted to a publisher, and then you're working with your editor and revising it. So I think the editor is a good it's not the cooking and it's analogy, but I would say she's like a choreographer. So she's kind of saying shifting the tempo here, shifting the pace, emphasizing this, emphasizing that. And my editor, Dutton, was wonderful and incredibly respectful, and it was just a great partnership. So I think it's a collaboration, and you can sense when it's done and when the piece is being overworked. So when it's cooked, you know.
I love that. And I mean, speaking about, of like when a project is done, I do want to speak a little bit about your ending. You know, in the end, Annie will do anything to protect her daughter, even if it means losing herself. And so, you know, just keeping with the theme of this particular episode, what is it about the bonds between mothers and daughters that are so powerful? And why did you want to write about these bonds specifically?
Well, I wrote a piece that's up now for Electric Literature, and it's about dysfunctional mother-daughter relationships and thrillers. And I think it's fascinating that mothers and daughters are it's the closest relationship in nature, but the person you rely on the most is the one who can harm you the most, intentionally or unintentionally. And I think that's just an interesting topic for a thriller. It's really sinister. Um, and I think it goes along with the quote I have in the beginning, the epigraph about evil being everyday and commonplace. I think that's the scariest kind of evil, and the subject of a lot of domestic or psychological thrillers. What we have to fear the most are often those who are closest to us.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, I just want to read this epigraph because it's so haunting. Evil is unspectacular and always human and shares our bed and eats at our own table, by W.H. Auden. Just truly haunting. And I mean, I know you spoke a little bit about the inclusion of this, but can you tell us why open with this specifically? Did you want the reader to experience something when first opening the book?
I just wanted to set the stage. The book is kind of a little bit weird. There's a lot of really raw, visceral, psychological horror and graphic descriptions. But in the end, I think true evil is just very pedestrian. It's it's not that I think the scariest evil is the one that eats at your own table or is just not is unspectacular. And I think that's why domestic thrillers are so shocking and scary. The whole idea of, people who are really into true crime, it's the same thing. The person next door.
Yeah.
would be the scariest person around.
Oh man, I feel like after I finish reading this book, I'm gonna with one eye open. It's truly, truly haunting. And Tammy, I don't know how much evil makes its way into your work. But I know that in addition to paintings, you also make artist books. And so for our audience members who aren't familiar, can you tell us more about what an artist book is and why you're compelled to create them?
Yeah, so I think this is not this is just my definition of what an artist book is. I think that an artist book is a work of art, which is derived from the book structure. And I think within that definition, um, there's a huge spectrum of what that means. So this can range from like, you know, punk rock zines, right, which were distributed democratically and made in a really kind of fast and kind of high energy way using modest materials like markers and a photocopy machine. There's also, kind of very, very kind of like finely, more like finely made artist books, which borrow a lot from, say, the techniques of fine binding, where books will have different drawers, multiple openings and stuff, but in all, the materials are part of the storytelling grammar, right? And I became interested in artist books um because I took an artist book class when I was in undergrad. I had no idea what it was at all, and I was an artist who was really interested in narrative, and I was engaged with painting, and I was engaged with a lot of printmaking, and so one thing kind of led to the next. And I just took an artist book class and was just completely mesmerized by the traditions, the techniques, the ways in which, artist books are so cool because, I'm really interested in simultaneity and the ability to mix many different things together. And with artist books, suddenly you can have many different spines. You can have many different ways to open something. And it affects the experience of the viewer or the reader, because that person has a new relationship to that simultaneity, right? And so that kind of opportunity is so thrilling for me to explore. And I think I've just been addicted since.
Wow, I think I'm gonna like after this just Google artist books and try to learn as much as I
You're
can about.
also in New York City, and next week, starting Thursday, is the New York Art Book Fair. I'm gonna be there, and you should come. You're gonna have the time of your life, and there's gonna be amazing artists and amazing thousands and thousands of amazing artist books.
Oh my God, I would love to go. I will be there. And just if only just to meet you in person. I'm such a big fan. Thank you for letting me know about that. And obviously everybody else who's in the chat, who's in New York City, I'm sure she'd love to have you. What advice do you have to anyone listening who's interested in pursuing art or artist bookmaking?
Um, well, for artist bookmaking, I think you should just start doing it. I think that artist bookmaking is really amazing because it is, I think, one of the areas in art where it's probably the most welcoming in terms of community. I think that anyone can just, grab some paper and some materials and, make some kind of a pamphlet or something that they can give to someone else, and that's just super. So I think if you're excited about that, then just go for it and give it to your friends and give it to your neighbors, give it to your family. There are so many different artist book communities that are all over the world now, and there's so many just zine fairs that are popping up. There's quite a few zine makers in Vietnam too, which I think is super cool. And Yeah, I just get to it. I find it to be one of the happiest places in the art world.
Wow, that is fascinating and so beautiful. That is so cool. Oh my gosh. Um, all right. Well, I know we don't have that much time left, right, Philip? Okay. Well, I would love for a KT to read a little bit about an excerpt from your book, just to give our audience members a flavor of this truly propulsive and compelling.
Did you say propulsive or repulsive?
Propulsive.
Oh, I thought you said repulsive.
Oh,
I was
God.
like, that's just a couple of the scenes. It's not the whole book.
Propulsive.
So I'm going to read just from the prologue a little bit. Annie Shaw held her mother's hand one last time. She wrapped her own bloody fingers around the old woman's fist, which now clutched a rusty Yao Bao knife. Mea, Annie babbled the Vietnamese word for mom over and over again. Mea, I didn't mean it. We struggled, but I never wanted to hurt you. She wasn't sure if she'd said the words out loud or just thought them. Regardless, her mother's crepe paper eyelids remained shut, her mouth frozen in a gummy rictus grin. Just then, a strange sensation crept over Annie. Was any of this real? The small hand grasped in hers felt too light, as if the bones were hollow like a bird's. Bright red blood on the blade and on Ma's neck suddenly looked as fake as cherry jello. A gurgling sound rose in the back of Annie's throat. Uncertain if it was a sob or a giggle, she swallowed, embarrassed, though it was just the two of them. And so that's the opening of the novel.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think Philip just summed it up in one word. Yeah, the experience of reading it. It's like, yeah, every single line, it's just packed with just a lot of feeling, a lot of action, a lot of like just forward motion. And so I mean, I can truly say that it's a page turner. So yeah, I mean, if let's see if there are any other questions, but you know, if anybody has questions, feel free to type it in the Q&A. And yeah, I mean, KT, do you have any advice for anyone in the audience who wants to write a book?
Oh, I think my top advice is just to not try to copy what's on the market right now or what you think will be successful. It's really just to write your story and to write it in your own voice, because that's what will draw the attention of an agent. You'll land an agent, and that's what's going to make it interesting to editors. And these are people who are reading like reams of slush pile manuscripts all day, and they want something a little different. So don't try to copy what you see out there that you think is going to be popular or is going to be selling if it's not something you feel passionate about yourself.
That is such sage advice. And it's totally advice that I'm going to remember from when I write my novel, which I'm currently in the midst of. And so, yeah, it's so easy to, you know, you want your own book to be a bestseller or to be popular. And so you're reading all these other books and you think, oh, how can I like fit into that same formula? But I love what you're saying in terms of just you know, write the stories that you want to read.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Well, okay. Well, I guess we can start the Q&A
Should we
now.
hop into it? Yeah. I as maybe to buy our audience some time to drop any questions y'all might have in the Q&A box, which is like here, maybe. I want to ask all of you, Lee included. I mean, have you introduced your work to your parents, and what's that reception been like? You know, we're talking about like chasing these generational threads and intergenerational trauma, dialogue, healing. Like, has it been a way for you to connect back? I'll pass it to you, Lee, first before Tammy and then Katie.
Oh, that is such a good question, especially because my book was just published in Vietnamese in Vietnam a few months ago. And so you know, when I first embarked on the journey of writing a memoir, part of me was like, I was afraid because I was writing about my family and I thought, oh, you know, it was a little scary. But then I thought, oh, my parents don't even speak English, so it's fine. And then I got this book deal with Vietnam, and so I thought, oh my goodness, wait, they're gonna actually read it. And so I was no longer safe. But my mother, last month, she texted me that she had, stayed up 2 consecutive nights in a row, reading my book and just loving it. And I was in tears when I heard that, because I mean, there's some really difficult things that I write about in terms of our history, my relationship with my parents. And so that was really, it was difficult for me to put that out in the world, knowing that one day they might read it. And so to hear my mother just be so incredibly supportive, and to validate my recollection of events even, was a really beautiful thing.
Oh my gosh, the vulnerability. I feel like I don't know if I ever wrote anything, if I would be able to have it translated and then ask my mom to read it, which is also part of why I'm asking the question. I mean, for you, Tammy, I know that you mentioned earlier that you work with the National Archive too. So in addition to wondering like if your folks have seen your work, like what like working in between two worlds in Vietnam and the United States and in diaspora is like too, because that sometimes comes up as a point of contention for creators working like in Vietnam and then in the US.
Um, I've been pretty lucky. I haven't met too much resistance in working with different materials. But I think that's partially because I've only exhibited work that might have sensitive materials in place in um in places where that hasn't been an issue. So I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get there. With regards to my parents, though, that has had a lot of resistance. It hasn't, it hasn't been smooth sailing. I, you know, I they never know what's going on really. And I don't really, I kind of, I'm always saying things like, oh, I'm very busy with my art. And, then they'll be like, well, okay. And, hope you still have that job and things like that, and it was funny because I had a baby, in the end of summer, and they had to meet the baby. They live in they live in San Francisco. And however the timing worked out, they had to come the weekend of my opening at the ICA in Boston. And so it became this huge family thing. I was so nervous I wouldn't make it to the opening that I gave myself a 32-hour buffer to make sure I got all of the aunties and uncles and everybody in Boston and everything. And, it was a big show, and it had a lot of this, sort of war material in the show. And I think that, I was I was a little nervous about it. There was like some Vietnamese in the show too, like Vietnamese, and I was just like so worried that something was spelled wrong. I was like, oh God, like it's the end of me if something's spelled wrong, And they came, and they were so they couldn't like believe it. Like they were like, well, where did this all come from? Where did all this work come from? And I think there's always been that kind of distance. And the best part of it was I had made a big old painting of President Ngo Dinh Diem. And I didn't know my parents loved him. And my mom kept talking about how nice I made his stomach. She was like, you got his belly just perfect. And like, I went through all this trouble thinking about history and like how it relates to this ideology and that. And there my mom is looking at this giant portrait of Ngo Dinh Diem, and she's like, Tammy got his belly just right.
I'm gonna pull it up as you're talking about it real quick so that the audience can see.
Oh my God, I love that your mom said that.
Oh my goodness.
Wow, check out that belly.
And I feel like there's a sort of like counter narrative that's at play around him too, in the sort of way that you represent him, which I imagine that was part of the
Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah.
it was part of it. It is a unique picture that was appropriated from Life magazine of him staring up at the US ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge. Yeah.
Oh, staring up, and instead in this image he's
Yeah, and then
staring
like
like kind of
the
down.
ambassador is kind of looming in this big old Tropicana winter forest.
Right. Oh my goodness. KT, what's well, is your novel? I know it's just been out a couple days, but any plans for it to be translated into Vietnamese and
I
the
don't
reception
know
from your
yet.
parents?
Yeah, I don't know yet. My father actually passed away before I started writing the book. So I think
Mm.
some of those feelings of grief transfer to the story when I was writing it. And my mother's in her 80s, so she hasn't read it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Casey, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chibol.
Yêu buồn.
Yeah, and I feel like oftentimes like when we hear on Accented, it becomes like a space for like some collective grieving and also like collective healing in that sort of simultaneous way that we were talking about earlier. Um, from the Q&A, oh, we got a couple of Q&A questions that came in. Let's see. One from Kim Nguyen, who asks, maybe going back to this note around confusion, if y'all think confusion is similar to the idea of standing in space or a sense of dislocation as an immigrant belonging to the duality of the host country and your native country. Yeah, so I guess relationships between like host native country or like homeland and adoptive home, how that might come out in your work. I'll pass this one first to KT.
I think my work is really about, I mean, homeland is in the book, it exists in terms of the family space. And so it's the family space inside and outside,
Mm.
everyone around. As I mean, I grew up in a very isolated setting. My character is in an isolated setting in a very affluent Washington, D.C. suburb, where she's really the only Vietnamese woman in that group. And I think it takes places inside and outside, which is not so coincidentally also how Annie's OCD manifests itself. It's a contamination-based OCD, where she lives inside is a contamination-free zone and outside's contaminated. So there are a lot of those elements of borders, inside, outside, contaminated, clean, not clean, and that's woven throughout the story.
I sense like the meta layers going on there, like the internal, external, and it feels like this the sort of present absences that may exist, especially if we're talking about this theme of like haunting and ghosts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I won't say,
Not to give too much away,
yeah,
and
I don't
no
want to give
spoilers.
any spoilers.
Spoiler alert.
But it seems as though her mother's died in the beginning, the portion I read where she discovers the body, and her mother's voice lingers in her head.
Mm. Lee, what about you and your memoir and your uncovering and process of self-discovery, like this, does this sense of dislocation, was it something that was and the relationship between like homeland, adoptive home, something that you thought through?
Absolutely. You know, I'm actually 7/8 Chinese. I'm Tiêu Chao and an eighth Vietnamese, but I was born in Vietnam. And so, you know, my family being in Vietnam, but also being ethnically Chinese, you know, my parents recounted facing some discrimination from the Vietnamese people against us. And then, you know, my father fought in the South Vietnamese army, and so he faced persecution, you know, for fighting for the South Side. And so then we come here as refugees, and now we're facing another layer of racism and being othered. And so I think my whole life I've been trying to figure out exactly where I stand in this world. And part of one of the themes of the memoir is uncovering all of these, you know, superficial markers of identity, just, you know, skin color, and also being female. You know, I'm in my family, I have 3 older brothers and I'm the only girl. And you know what it's like to grow up in this very patriarchal society. And so there is so much duality, so much just so many multitudes within me that the memoir really tries to reconcile. And yeah, it's tough and it's an ongoing journey. And I think through my art, through my writing, that's how I carve a space for myself in this world.
Mm. And like that sense of belonging being like multitudinous, I feel, right? It's almost like we're peeling back layers of an onion.
Yeah.
Um, to Tammy, the same question. Like you're belonging to the duality or multiplicity of a host country and between host country and native country.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think there was a part of me a while ago that was really trying to like make peace with something, or like to maybe identify with one more than the other, or at least find a place where you could belong. I think that was like a really like that was like a very like sort of, it was like a yearning that I had, you know. But I think that over the years, as I've continued to make work that at the beginning, of course, sought for this clarity and comfort, I think now it's just like trying to keep like the vibration, the agitation going as a way to kind of gain a confidence about being in the double consciousness, you know, like it's constantly oscillating, it's constantly kind of shifting back and forth. You're just, you know, I don't know, your identity, you kind of lean into one side a little bit more sometimes, and you lean into the other. And for me, I have found like a little bit more ease over time, as with like kind of leaning in and out of whatever is appropriate or seems right to me at that particular time and place.
I think there's a question from Erin Lowry who asked Tammy they'd want to she says they say that they'd love to hear more about your experience of living in Vietnam. What was unexpected about it? What perspectives did you bring back with you? Especially, I think, as you're talking about this like sense of belonging or yearning, like going to Vietnam and living there for 4 years, like was that something that you were able to get out of that experience?
Well, I think in regards to the previous question, I think I mean I was made people let me know that I wasn't really Vietnamese enough or something. I really felt that way. But so when I that I think that was just like one feeling of many different feelings, and in hindsight it wasn't really an important feeling anymore. um I at the beginning, you know, what was so remarkable for me though was that I went there on a Fulbright fellowship to study lacquer painting, and so I was able to study this awesome traditional Vietnamese painting technique. And for me, as someone who was born and raised in San Francisco, had done art school in New York, um, making art friends who were like my age in art school for the first time, and everybody was speaking Vietnamese, and so I had to really like make my Vietnamese much better and stuff like that was amazing. Because before that, my relationship to Vietnam and speaking Vietnamese was one between like, you know, parents and their daughter, or the daughter and her relatives, you know. And I didn't really have peers, so I didn't know what it was like to like crack a joke, curse out loud, you know, express like actual like, you know, feistier feelings that I would probably never dare express to my parents, you know. So that type of that kind of dynamic was so incredible for me. um I think that there was a bit of a honeymoon period while living in Vietnam, where everything was just so amazing and I was absorbing. And then I think that after maybe a couple of years, and I was really there for there living and making art, you know, these serious questions about, you know, what do I believe, like really started to emerge. And then that kind of created in some ways like the foundational questions for what my practice tries to ask and explore today.
Just word. Yeah, no, I think that really, I mean, that's beautiful. I think that really, I'm like, that how it resonates. I think for me, someone who still negotiates like my relationship to like the whatever, like South Vietnam and what it was for my parents and like Vietnam now and like listening to V-pop, but having never been back to the home country, that this like multiplicity or double dual consciousness or multiple consciousnesses existing all at once in terms of Vietnamese identity is something that like I think for me and like a lot of us probably like think through or reckoning with. Um and in the same way that we are trying to figure out and reckon with all of um the complicated things that exist here in living here in the United States, like with our parents or at home. I my I want to ask a question for you, KT, from Tao Zheng, who asks that they want to hear also about your personal journey with learning about your OCD, the challenges, hardships associated with the diagnosis, especially at that particular stage of your life, and if slash how writing a thriller, specifically this genre, helped you personally with your own mental health.
Well, I actually was diagnosed with, I basically talk therapy was of no help to me. I went for the first time in college and I was diagnosed with depression, which I mean, I probably was depressed, but then in my 20s as well. And I was never diagnosed with OCD until my late 20s, early 30s. Um, and I didn't really get serious about the treatment for a couple years until after my daughter was born, when I realized I had to really take care of this. I had to really confront it or it would impact her life. And because half of OCD cases, about half are hereditary, and of such a strong genetic component. In my case, medication totally turned things around because it's a biochemical issue in my case and very heavily influenced by genetics. So that's one thing that I hope the book will really accomplish, as I said, which is broadening the perception of OCD. And I think the International OCD Foundation says that about 2 to 3 million adults in the US have OCD. And a lot of people just don't know they have it because it's so inaccurately portrayed. And I think it's important to see someone who specializes in OCD versus just a regular psychologist.
Mm. And if I may ask, like how old your daughter is now,
Oh
KT,
my
and
goodness,
what you hope for her to gain whenever she's able to read this book,
she
your
is
book.
turning 15.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, she's
Good.
turning 15, so it's been a while. And yeah, I think it'll just be, I don't know if she's read it, it's in the house. I doubt it. Teenagers don't she read so much until she was like 11 and then they stop and they become teenagers and they
Mm,
don't read as much. Um she might have read it, I don't know, but if she hasn't yet, later she will, and I think it'll be a good way for her to get insight into her mother's experience, my experience. Think of how cool it would be if you had a book to read about your mother when she was younger or inspired by her life. That would be really interesting.
mm. That's
So
all I've been thinking about for
Oh,
this past time that we've been together. Yeah, it's like, what if I was able to really gain that insight into the folks that I came from?
yeah.
Um, Yeah, we have one question from an anonymous attendee for you too, Lee, as our guest host. How do you go through the struggle of wanting to create art about your experience in childhood, but also while also protecting your family? Their mom and them have a really complicated relationship, and they know if they laid out the facts, it doesn't put her in a good life, and she doesn't want to paint her as a monster. So sort of in that similar vein.
yeah, that's a great question. You know, for me, when I first started writing my book, I made this little pact with myself. I said that I would not ask for anyone for permission to tell my story but myself. And so I proceeded to write the memoir. And as I wrote, you know, I really, I have a very complicated relationship with my parents. A lot of abuse, a lot of trauma. But at the end of the day, I know deep in my heart that I love them. And so I knew that if I just wrote the truth, that that love would shine through in my writing. And, you know, judging from your desire to protect your family, it's clear that there's so much love there already. And so my advice is to just proceed with that love, and see where it takes you.
Deep. I hope you turn that into a clip that we share out to all of our folks. I want to thank you all for being here tonight on Accented. And as we begin to close out, I'm gonna go ahead and share that survey that we were talking about, so that y'all can support us to support you. If you can take a couple seconds, a few moments to fill out the survey as we close out, and as I ask the last question of our guests, which is we are going to a potluck, a family potluck, and you are bringing a dish. You can cook it or acquire it from somewhere. If you could close us out with telling us where we can find you, what's next, and what you would bring to that potluck. I'll start with you, Tammy.
Okay, so what was it? It was what am I working on, where you can find me, right? Those are
Yep.
so folks who are in and out of New York for next Thursday through next Sunday is the amazing New York Art Book Fair. I will be there with my imprint, Passenger Pigeon Press, along with my collaborators, Atomic Terrain. We are presenting this super a super cool rose grafting workshop that has a lot to do with nuclear history and the atom bomb rose. Atomic Terrain is a collaboration with Gabriella Hurst, Warren Harper, and Lovely Umayya. And I'm currently working on my next exhibition, which is going to be at the Sarasota Museum of Art in October. What I would bring, you know, so when I was doing research in Phongya, I was eating a lot of geo sauce, and I ended up like writing about it because geo was so interesting because it was the only place in Vietnam where I really had it. And I asked my guide like how they made it, and he said, you know, you had like all these different herbs and stuff like that. And I wrote about it in this artist book called O that was published by Ugly Duckling Press. And I have been inviting other people to make it. And I think that is what I would bring to the potluck. Jungle sauce.
The jail sauce. Okay.
Yeah, jungle sauce. Yeah.
It's funny because I don't think that's the first time that jail sauce has been mentioned on the show. Like I feel
Oh,
like it's
really?
been a recurring theme. Yeah, for
Oh, that's
sure.
so
I
interesting.
think especially when we have
Jail or
the
chow? Not chow, jail.
yeah,
Jail sauce.
jail.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah.
it's like a green, it's like a green sauce.
Yeah.
Interesting.
KT, to you. Where can
Oh,
we find you? What's going on next and what you're bringing to the potluck?
you can check out my website, ktnguyenauthor.com, and it has my events coming up. I'm actually leaving in the morning for the LA Times Festival of Books, so I'll be there on Saturday at 3 if you want to come out and see me. I'll be presenting there, and various podcasts coming up. You can check out the schedule on my website. And I would bring some kind of gia, maybe giapap or giarao-san, because it's easy
Ooh,
to make and I like it.
nice. Nothing, can't be easy and tasty. So,
Yeah, I loved yeah.
mm, Lee.
Yeah, I think my answer is going to be a little unorthodox. You know, before I had like this answer, I'm working on a novel and I'm also working on a screenplay. But really the thing that I want to focus on right now is working on myself. And you know, there's this quote from Michaela Coel, who is one of my idols, and she says, "In a world that entices us to browse through the lives of others to help us better determine how we feel about ourselves and to in turn feel the need to be constantly visible, for visibility these days seems to somehow equate to success. Do not be afraid to disappear from us for a while and see what comes to you in the silence." And so I think after reading that quote, I am in a sense, disappearing. I'm not really on social media that much, so I apologize to anyone who's following me that you're not seeing any content. I'm disappearing in a sense, but hopefully to return to my craft, a better, stronger, more confident version of myself.
And we love that for you. And for y'all, before we pass the puzzle to take us out, thank you all again to Lee, Tammy, and KT for joining us on Accented Dialogues in Diaspora presented by DVAN. Appreciate y'all deeply.